Hello, my name is Andrew Larson. I'm a blacksmith and a tool maker from Kentucky. I'm here at Cole Iron Works today. We're going to make a rounding hammer start to finish using the KA75 power hammer. This is going to differ a little bit from how I normally make rounding hammers. I normally make them slightly different. I use a self-contained hammer and some bolt-on tooling. We're going to be using spring fullers instead of bolt-on tooling, but the same concept is going to be there. So we'll go through the tooling here real quick that I have. The first thing we're going to be doing is punching the eye. This is a simple power hammer punch for punching under the power hammer. I have an assortment of tongs. A pair of pickup tongs and a pair of hammer tongs will be the most important. These are just my touch mark here. A bolster for drifting underneath the power hammer. You'll see how that's used. A couple short drifts here for use under the power hammer, and a full length drift for the final taper of the eye. General tools, just a speed square for marking out the billet, center punch, and then a couple other tools here for drifting, and a cupping bolster to forge the round die of the hammer. You don't have to have this, however, it's going to make your work a lot easier later when you grind the hammer if you just simply forge the round die in from the start. So we'll get started here. The first thing we're going to do is mark out our billet. This is a piece of 1045. This is a 2.5 pound billet, so it's 1 3/4 diameter round by 4 inches long. And I have already chamfered the corners, the edges on each side. All that's going to do is allow it to flow easier into the cupping tool when we start to forge the faces. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a Sharpie and mark generally about where I think is center. Just a mark there. And I know this is 4 inches long, so I'm going to set my speed square at 2 inches. Use a scribe, and I'm going to scribe from each side. And now I have 2 marks, and I can divide those in half, and I have my center of the billet. Use my center punch. I'm just using a simple round center punch, even though the tip of my hammer punch is not round, it's squared, diamond-ish. I just use a round center punch. That seems to work fine. One little trick when marking these out, to put a hardy tool in the hardy hole of the anvil so it can't roll. So you can go right up against that. We'll go a tiny bit deeper. So there we go. We'll go into the fire with that. Most of my manipulations of steel at the fire are going to be done using pickup tongs. They're easier to grab steel in out of the fire with all that heat coming at you. So we'll go into the fire. All right, here we go on the first heat. I'm going to be very careful with this very first hit. This is the most important hit in punching the eye. That it's lined up perfectly with my center punch mark, so it's end to end. You can fix it if you have to, but it's better to get it right. I'm flipping the billet. The reason I'm flipping the billet is to keep the hole going evenly down. I'm going to keep my punch cool. I'm cooling it in a commercially sold and used punch lube. I think you guys sell it here. If your punch is starting to get stuck, it's probably heating up too much. So you want to keep that cooled off. Notice I'm keeping the punch out of the billet, not letting it get too hot or sit for too long. If the punch gets a little too hot, I'm going to dip it in the water. Not going to quench it, just splash it in the water. So we're about 70% of the way through there. We're going to take another heat to finish it up. There it is. Once we get far enough down in here, we're about there. I take one more hit from this side. I'm gonna flip the billet and come back from the other side. I go about 90% through and then come back and punch the remaining 10% back from the other side. Just like from the beginning, I want to make sure this is lined up properly. Once I get it started past this point, I can't really correct it and change it, so I want to make sure everything is lined up well. And it's pretty good. As I'm establishing this hole, you'll notice until the punch is down in the hole a little bit, I'm flipping every time I hit. That's in case there's any differences in the punch side to side. That makes it so I'm forging it evenly. So we're about to punch the plug out here. Here it goes. There's the plug right here. We'll release this. There's the hole. This is a capsule-shaped hole. This will be a capsule-shaped eye or a slot. We punch a slot mostly instead of a round hole. That's going to allow us to open it up and not lose as much material on the sides and retain a lot of material here for the cheeks of the hammer. So the first thing we're going to do here is drive these short drifts into here to start the eye. Get them started at the anvil. Then use the bolster. Drive them through. I'm going to brush the faces so I'm not forging scale into the hammer. Flip it over, go from the other side. Notice I'm using a second drift. That's just so I'm not wearing out my drifts as quickly. So right there, we've started to establish the size of our eye. In the next heat, we'll drift it with the final drift and begin to draw the cheeks out. Here we go. I'm going to start by drifting. Then using my spring fullers in the center of the cheeks. Then to the top. Now I'm going to release it off the drift and go from the other side. Actually, Don't need a glove. This time, instead of starting the center, I've already established the center, so I'm going to go to the high. High. And now the center. Now I'll release it. When we release this, we're doing several things at the same time. And I'm going to actually drive this a little further into here. Release it again. What we're doing is we're not only forging our faces, we're also shortening the billet, and we're forging the eye on the insides on the ends. When we're forging down from the sides with the fullers, we're forging the eye on the inside from the sides. When we go to release it, like this, we're forging the eye on the ends. That allows us to have a clean eye all the way around with no points pinched off on the inside or visible from the outside, so we can get a good fit with the handle, full contact all the way around with the handle. Now I'm going to look at it here and give it a visual inspection to make sure that both sides of the eye are about the same size. This side is a little bit smaller, so I'm going to take and drift that open to the same size as the other side. Release it. Now for all you need a rounding hammer to do, this is technically a finished hammer. We have an eye that's drifted to size. It has contact all the way around on the inside. I'm not sure if you can see, but you can see all the way around on the inside of the eye, there's contact, it's shiny. We have a rounding die forged and we have a flat die forged. So for all we need a rounding hammer to do, that's all we need. However, we're going to go a little further in the next few heats with fullers to make it look a little nicer and to bring the cheeks out further so we have more contact on the handle. So I'm going to show real quick what I mean here by center and high when I'm saying those terms when I'm using the fullers under the hammer. When my drift is in the hammer and I'm using my fullers to spread the cheeks, when I say high, I mean to the high side of the drift. So that's this line here. That's my high side of the drift. When I say center, I mean the center. When it's on the drift, because this is an hourglass shaped eye drifted from both sides, you will never hit to the low side of the drift. You'll only hit the center and the high. If you hit to the low, you're going to collapse the hole that you want open on the bottom. So then I'll take the drift out, put it in the other side of the eye, and then I can do center and high on this side. So that's what I mean by high and center. I'm trying to establish 3 fuller lines across here. That's going to help me out later when I go in with a larger set of fullers to smooth this all out. But just to keep things tidy and even, I'm trying to forge 3 fuller lines, and I do that by going center high. So now we're going to begin to forge the trough lines. I'll explain why these are forged in a moment here. We're going to be using the spring fullers, using the nubs of the hammer tongs to guide where those fullers start and stop. Trying to forge evenly, meaning if I do it on one side, I want to go to the other side and match it. So there we've started that set of troughs. We'll heat it back up and do the other side, just like that. So we're going to do the same exact thing as last time. We're just doing it on the opposite side of the hammer. going to turn it over and make this first side match our second side here real quick. So there we go. Those are our troughs forged. Now what this allows us to do now is now we can put the drift back in and we can use our fullers to get below the level of the faces to draw the cheeks out further than we could had we not forged those trough lines in there. Those trough lines serve only the purpose of relief, so we're not forging into our faces when we push the cheeks out in each direction. All right, we're now going to drift and begin to pull the cheeks out. Just like before, we're going to start in the center of the cheeks. Center, and then high. High. And now, after I've hit the highs twice, I'm going to redrive the drift slightly to tighten it up. Wrong hands. We're now going to release the hammer. I'm going to brush the faces again like before. Keep some of that scale off. So now we'll go back in the fire and do the same thing but from the opposite side. So now we're going to do the same exact thing we did, just on the opposite side. We're using these hump tools here, as they're called, to support the cheeks of the hammer now that we have established them, so they don't get smashed as we drive the drift. I'm going to clean that scale off so I can see where I'm forging, and so I don't forge it into the piece. Drift slightly farther, just so I'm keeping the whole eye filled all the way around. So there we go. We'll now release it in the cupping tool once again, trying to keep the faces fairly clean. So there we go. So now we're going to repeat the same steps from the last two heats, except we're going to use a larger set of fullers to do it. And we're going to keep the cheeks very clean while doing it. This is our cleaning up, smoothing out, and finishing of the cheeks. Like I said, we want to keep them real clean. Make sure to forge evenly as we do this. So there we go, that side is done. I'm gonna release it. And do the same thing to the other side. Same exact thing as last time, but to the opposite side of the hammer. There we go. I didn't release it that time because I don't want to upset it anymore. It's far enough as it is. Drift from this side. Make sure everything's even. Last thing we're going to do is take a light heat and run back through the troughs one last time to clean everything up, and that'll be it. Before we run through these, I'm going to brush them out real good because this is our final forging on these. I don't want to forge any of that scale in, ideally. And go from the tops to the corners. And to the sides. I want to be real careful with this. Get it in the right spot. Take a light heat on the other side, and that will be it. Same thing as the other side. I'm going to brush it first. A little bit of scale developed on the sides there, so I'm going to brush that off instead of forging that in. The very last thing I'll do here is go back through each side at this low, dull red. All this is going to do is shine everything up, make it nice and crisp. I'll take a real light heat to touch mark it, but that's it. So I'm putting the drift in to touch mark it. I always just lay it down on the corner of the striking anvil just like this when I'm alone. If I have someone with me, I'll have somebody hold it. There it is. So what I've just got done doing is just a rough grind on the hammer. This is about a 36 grit belt. This is as much grinding as I do before heat treat. I've ground the round die so it's a slightly squashed ball, equal radius in all directions, and I've rounded the corner over so it's not a sharp corner, it's a nice gentle transition. And then the flat die is flat with all the corners radius, sides and top and bottom, as well as the four corners. Next step is to simply radius the inside of the bottom of the eye so that when we drive the handle in, the handle drives in easily and doesn't split any pieces off the handle, and then we'll be ready to heat treat it. All right, so I have a carbide burr on just a simple die grinder. I'm going to radius the corner of the eye on the bottom of the eye, bottom of the hammer. So all I've done is taken a cut all the way around on the inside of the eye, that corner, and radiused it. I'll explain what that does for us when we go to handle it here soon. All right, so I'm about to harden it, and then right after that we'll temper it, but I'm gonna harden these faces using a torch. I've got a rosebud tip, and I'm gonna do them one at a time. So I'm gonna heat up one face, quench it in water, flip it over, heat up the other face and quench it in water. By doing it this way, you're only hardening about a 1/4 inch of each of the faces, and you're not heating up the whole hammer, so you don't get any scale on the cheeks or in the troughs. So you're able to keep the hammer really clean by doing it this way. This is one of many ways to harden and temper a hammer. This is 1045, so it's a water quench steel. So I'm going to do a circular motion with the torch, keeping it moving, not in one place. So the rounding side is done. I like to do the rounding side first because I feel like it has a little more tendency to heat the other side up and get more heat on the other side by doing the rounding side, because the flames flow over the side rather than right against the flat of the hammer. It's just something I do. You don't have to do it that way. I don't think it really matters. Now we'll do this side. Like I was saying, well, the torch was running, in case you couldn't hear it. I'm keeping the torch moving. I'm not holding it in one spot. I'm moving it constantly around in a circle to heat the whole thing up. since I'm only heating a small portion of the face, I'm quenching right into cold water. It cools off very quickly. That's probably getting close to as quick as you want to cool 1045. So this is very hard now. You can see that there. So now we're going to grind the faces with a 120 grit-ish belt to shine them up again, and I'm going to temper the hammer then, and then hot oil finish it after I temper it. I'm using a rotary platen here to grind the round face now. I could use a slack belt as well, but these rotary platens are really nice to do this when you can use one. That's just gonna conform to the shape of the round die for me. So I've taken out all of my 36 grit marks from before, and I have all my grinding lines running in this direction now. So it's gonna be easy to shine that up later after I temper it. So now I'm gonna put the flat platen back on here and do this side, and then we'll temper it. One little tidbit here about grinding the flat die. Like I said, same thing as with the round die, I want all my grind lines running in one direction. With this one, I have a bunch of different facets. So with this one, I run this direction diagonally on all the diagonals, then up and down just on the top and bottom, and then across this way. And that's the same direction I'll run everything later on with a Scotch-Brite belt, and it'll all look very good then. We'll see then. Ready to temper. All right, so we're ready to temper this hammer. The way I'm going to temper this is with a torch, and I'm going to heat the center of the cheeks and let that heat flow out to the faces. And I'm just going to watch the faces, and I want them to turn a dull straw color. That's going to leave the faces fairly hard, about as hard as we want them to be, and the center of the hammer is going to be soft. It's also going to allow most of the hammer to be hot enough to receive a nice oil finish when I wipe it with this cotton rag with oil on it after I've heated it up. And it'll take a finish much like a cast iron pan does, just like seasoning a cast iron pan. It's gonna keep it from rusting and give it a nice black finish. I can heat it from inside the eye as well, a little bit here and there. I'm just watching for a dull straw color on the faces. So I now have a dull straw color starting on the faces. I'm gonna hot oil finish this now. The faces are approaching 400 degrees, about 375 right now, and the rest of the hammer is about 600 degrees. That's perfect for taking on a nice dark finish and soaking that oil up into the pores of the surface, if you will. It's not too hot right now, so I don't have too much color on the faces. So I have time. I'm gonna get a little more oil on this rag. There we go. Make sure to breathe in deeply when it blows your way. And once I'm done oiling this, to stop it from tempering any further, because it will continue to temper if I just let it sit, I'm just gonna dunk it in water real quick. That's gonna arrest the temper. I'm still gonna leave it somewhat warm so I can put some more oil on it while it's still hot. You wouldn't want to do that with a higher carbon steel, of course, especially like an 01 tool steel or something, but for 1045, that's fine. So there it is, hardened and tempered. You can see, does that catch the color good? The dull straw color on the face there. On both sides. And that is ready to shine up the faces and put a handle in it. All right, so I'm going to shine the faces up with Scotch-Brite, a Scotch-Brite belt now. You only want to run Scotch-Brite belts at about 30 to 40% speed. So there it is. After Scotch-Brite, you can see it looks good with the grind lines all running their own direction, and all the lines are running in the same direction here. I'll show what it would look like real quick if I ran some lines the other way. Hopefully the camera can pick that up, but you can see that doesn't look very clean. So I run it all in the same direction. So there you go. That is purely for looks. That serves no purpose. It doesn't matter which way they're running. It's purely for looks. It's ready for a handle. All right, so I'm gonna make a handle for this hammer real quick. I have a piece of hickory and I have a slot cut in it and a pre-made wedge. I made this yesterday. This wedge is made with a 36 grit belt, so it's a very rough finish. That's gonna aid later when wood glue is put on this before it's driven in. The wood glue has a place to get down in the grooves and it won't all be pushed off as it's driven in. My slot in the handle is very slightly shorter, maybe about a 1/4 inch shorter than my wedge. That's gonna allow me to bottom the wedge all the way out in the slot. It's pretty simple. I'm gonna make a little bit of this is a straight handle. I prefer this style of handle in larger hammers. This is a 2.5 pound hammer, so I'm gonna make a slightly different style of handle, but same basic concept though. Now I'm gonna smooth this all out with a 120 grit belt, and then we'll be ready to fit the handle. All right, so we have the handle fitting about where I want it to, as far as I want it to, sculpted most of the way with a 36 grit belt. Now I'm going to smooth it all off and fit it the rest of the way with a 120 grit, then fit the wedge with a 120 grit, then put it all together. Handle is all smoothed off. Now fitting the wedge, the way I'm going to fit this wedge, what I mean by that is I'm going to grind it tapered very slightly to where it's going to fit in the top of this eye tight. So I'll show you exactly what I mean. So I've tapered it, I've radiused the ends, so it now fits down in that eye, the radius fits the ends of the eye, and it's about where it's going to stop when I drive it in. So now that gives me full contact front and back with the wedge, and full contact on the sides and the front and back with the handle. So now it's time to put this all together. All right, so I'm gonna drive the handle in now. I'm gonna put the hammer on the same hump tools we used earlier during forging. That's going to support it. I'm going to take my handle, make sure I'm driving it in straight. And hold it up, look at it. I can hold it up to something square in a room if I've got a square corner somewhere. That can help sometimes if you can't quite tell. That's pretty straight. That's pretty good. All right. I'm gonna need something out of my box here real quick. I forgot to grab. So I'm gonna put the wedge in now. However, the slot for the wedge is closed up. As you can see the line where it is, but it's closed up. So I'm gonna take this slitting chisel here, and I'm going to very gently open that up with this and put it right on that line. And now I have an opening where I can now start the wedge. I'm going to start the wedge, get some wood glue. This is the limited edition finger paint wood glue from Gorilla Glue. So I've got some glue on there, and as we discussed earlier, the grooves from using a very very aggressive belt to make this wedge are going to hold some of that glue in there on the wedge, even when we drive it into here. So I'm going to put that flat against the anvil and drive straight down on the top of the handle. Driving this in this way not only drives our wedge in, but it's putting inertia on the handle downward, that if the head can come up on the handle anymore, if it can move anymore, it will when I'm doing this. So I've got about a 1/4 inch left of that wedge still sticking up. What that means to me is that I've bottomed that wedge out. Remember, I cut that slot for that wedge about a 1/4 inch short of the wedge. So now I know I've bottomed that wedge out in the slot. Now I can trim this off on the grinder, radius up the end of the handle, put oil on it, and that'll be it. Oil that handle and that'll be it. So, is this a product spotlight? Yeah. So that's the full process, making a rounding hammer the way I would under this power hammer. This is slightly different from the power hammers I use every day. This is much more similar. I would compare it more to having someone swinging a sledgehammer for me, which I'm also very used to. So that the crossover there is very, very similar to me. So this is a lot of fun. There's the hammer, made completely under this with spring tooling. If you want to find more of what I do, I'm on Instagram at Andrew Larson Blacksmith, and my website's also Andrew Larson Blacksmith. So hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.